Okay, so let's demo PowerShell. Now, I'll tell you what I'll do first. I'll show you PowerShell.exe, and then I'll show you sqlps. There's really not much of a difference unless you want to run a SQL command. Use that invoke SQL command. So you could just go over to your run prompt. You could type in, you could even do this. You could go to your command prompt and then type in PowerShell, and you can actually watch it load up PowerShell. So right now, you're no longer in the command prompt. We could see right here, PS, I'm now in PowerShell. Now, I could, if I wanted to, instead of doing that, I could just go to the run prompt and type in PowerShell. Okay, production, that messed my screen up. So I'm just going to basically say I could go to the thing and we'll skip over that. 3, 2, 1. I'm just going to hit cancel here. There's another technique that I can use. I can go to Windows PowerShell 1.0 and I can just issue it directly here. If you're working on a server and you do not see PowerShell installed, then it's going to be one of the features that you have to install, one of the Windows components, one of the Windows features here. So you'll go to your server manager. Like I'm on a Windows 2008 box, so you would go to your server manager and you would enable the feature for PowerShell. I don't feel like going through the pain in the you-know-what that this screen offers me, but that's how you would get the PowerShell installed. For those of you on Windows 2003 XP, it's a separate download that you have to install. Okay, so Windows PowerShell, let me just go back over here. Sometimes you'll see on certain computers, you'll see the blue background, and some people like yellow colors. I just leave mine a black and white. I think it shows up fairly well. I just want to show you a couple of pieces here within PowerShell that may get you started. You'll notice here that it looks just like DOS, and it is just like DOS. If I say dir, you'll notice I get the directory list here. If I say use the CD, I want to go to the root of the C drive. Sure enough, that's exactly how I do it, and I can do that. I can make directory, and so now I've made a new directory, Scott. So remember what I said, anything you can do at the command line, you can also do here at PowerShell. What I want to do, though, and what we've talked about doing, is issue SQL statements or perform some type of SQL Server manipulation or database administration. So let me clear the screen, CLS. So again, just like working at the DOS box, right? So do you remember the SQL Server commandlet that allowed us to issue a SQL statement? Yeah, it was invoke SQL command, right? You remember that? And so I tell it that I want a query, and I could say select all from sys.databases or whatever that you wanted to put in here. But when I do this, then PowerShell doesn't recognize invoke SQL command as a commandlet. I haven't registered the commandlet with PowerShell. Only thing I need to do that is sqlps. Okay, so I'm in PowerShell and I say sqlps, and you watch it switch over. Now you can see the SQL Server PowerShell, the mini shell here. You can see the version number. I don't know why through Service Pack 1 they did not update this, but it was not updated in Service Pack 1, so it still shows the RTM release. And you'll notice here what's called the SQL Server drive. Okay, so I can switch between, this is so neat, I can switch between working with the operating system, or I can switch back over to the SQL Server drive. And you can see then when I do the dir, all the cool stuff. You are able to treat your SQL Server just like files and folders. So here notice that I want to use the database engine. So I can say, here's the name, CD SQL. Okay. And now I can see all the pieces that are here. I have one machine, on this physical server, one instance. So now I can say CD, I don't know why I'm doing that there, doesn't matter. Learn It First 10. Oops, and I messed up. I can hit Control C to stop the execution, but it's still trying to connect to an instance Learn It First _10. And we'll try again. And by the way, you can cycle through your previously issued commands using the up and down arrows on your keyboard. So now I connect to that instance. You can see that there are, on this server rather, there's 2 instances. So I now want to use the default instance. And now underneath that, I can see databases. I can see logins, dir logins. And I'm just able to access this just like it was a regular command line, right? Well, that's kind of interesting. That's not something that I think you're going to find is more fun than playing in the Management Studio. It is a very Management Studio interface, by the way. It's just like drilling down through hierarchies, right? Like we could go CD to Scott Wiggum and then take a look here. I need a CD logins / Scott Wiggum, because you could see we did a directory of logins and then there's Scott Wiggum. And when I take a look there, bring it over here, then take a look. There's really no properties below that level that we could actually see. Okay, now that we've got the basics of the SQL Server drive, okay, and using SQL PS, let me show you inside the Management Studio over here the integration. So when we're on databases and we right click and we say start PowerShell, then it automatically loads up SQL PS and it puts us in that same location, right? This is the same thing we could have done ourselves. We could have gone to PowerShell. We could have loaded up SQL PS. We could have done all of our switching over. We could have said CD SQL, and I want to use the machine Learn It First -10, and I want to use the default instance. I'm sorry, typing and talking apparently. Right? We could have done all that. It just does it automatically for us. So default /databases. Okay? And so I'm in the exact same situation. So it's just a shortcut when it says to start PowerShell there. That's all it is. Okay. And by the way, when we're in our SQL agent, just to show you the coverage of the jobs, let me get it to start that up. It's stopped right now. Come on, man, you're slow. When you make a job, you'll notice that one of the steps, if we go take a look at that, is PowerShell. Okay, so we can actually choose to do a PowerShell script. Okay, just show you that. Okay, so there's some other little bits and pieces here. Let me just, I don't even need the SQL Server side of it here. Just give me some clean stuff here. So you need to know some of the basic commandlets when you're working with PowerShell. One of the ones you want to know is get help. And if you just run get help, they did a good job of integrating a lot of this on-screen help here. So you can see, you can just say get help to get the syntax, or you can say get help and you can include a commandlet. So if you don't know the syntax, for example, of invoke SQL command, then you could just say get help invoke SQL command, and it will give you the syntax of it. Here's what it will do. Here's the syntax. Here how we use connect to a server, which database that I want to use, what the query is that I'd like to work with. So there's a lot of other information that you can pass in here. Okay? So get help is something you definitely want to know. You can also type in get command, and you can see a list of all of the current commandlets that you're able to work with here. So you could see the type over here, the commandlet that we have. And of course you could say get help, get command to get a list of how to actually extend that with the PSS snap-ins, the PowerShell snap-ins, or to get other information that you wanted to. Okay, so there's a lot of help built directly into the PowerShell shell itself. Okay, and you can say like, here's one that you might care about. So we could say get help SQL Server, and it will tell you all about the SQL PS and how to use that. And You get almost way too much information if you do. So just to show you, that was get help SQL Server if you wanted to play around with that. Okay. Okay, so let's see. One thing that I want to do, remember how I said earlier that we could look at the event logs, and with PowerShell we could load them into SQL Server? Well, here's a commandlet called get event log here. Now, we need to know the log name. Okay, well, gosh, let's see. I don't remember what my syntax is. So get help, get event log. And I can see my syntax here. You can see the log name. Okay, well, here's one that you really need to know, and it's the list. And the list, what it will do for you is give you the list of the actual event logs that are on the system. So go run your list, and we can see the application event log. The Windows PowerShell has its own. Okay, so I'm kind of working it through there. So now you mean I could say application? Yeah, that's exactly what I mean. And you're now able to browse the event log within the PowerShell. Now, if you wanted to get a little more info, so oops, there's no alias for get help. Get event log. You could take a look that you could say, you know what, I want only the newest items, and I want only the newest 20. So instead of bringing back every single entry, we could say get event log. I want to get the application event log, and I want the newest 10 entries only. So it only returns us the newest 10. Okay. Now you can even do things like searching, and you could say I want to filter to only find the event log entries that have this as a keyword in the message. I'll give you basics of how to get that stuff done. What I want to do, though, I've got a script here that will create a database called event log dump, and it will create a table calling it the event log. And what we're going to do, we want to store the event logs in a SQL Server table. So I've just picked out the few basic columns, the add date, the source, the type. So we've got our table created, and I have a stored procedure that we will run. For each row to add in here, we'll just do an insert. Okay? So this table is empty. There's nothing in it. When we take a look at our event log in Windows, just let that load up for a second. We have several rows in here. I think it said something like 340 rows were currently in the event log. So we want to be able to track all of this information. So I need to know my PowerShell. Now I can just go to SQL PS, right? So I can go straight to that from the run prompt there. And I could say get event log application. And you can filter as you need to say I only want the newest 10. Okay, so you see the column names. What PowerShell has done is it's iterated through the log to make each one of these an object. So we can iterate through this set of data. Okay, so what I can do, and what I have done, is in this PS1 file that is with this, I have created a PowerShell script. Now let's see about making this a little bigger. Maybe I'll bring this into text notepad here. I don't know if this is going to be easy to see for you or not. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. Here's a variable in my PowerShell script. So we're assigning the variable events to be get event log, and which event log? The application, and I only want to return the newest 20 rows. And PowerShell has a very, very handy for each function that operates on each element in a container here. So we're going to iterate through every record inside the event log. And so now I'm creating a variable called entry. And the variable entry is for each event, for each row in the event viewer. So for each one of these, okay, it's going to create this, it's going to create this new variable and iterate through from here to here. So here's what I do. I'm going to create a message or a temporary variable to store the message. So the trick here is that the messages often have single quotes in the actual error, but if we include that in a SQL command, then that gives us a syntax error. So I have to escape. So here's how I say a single quote. I actually have to escape it by putting two single quotes. So that's not a double quote. Just to show you, a double quote would look like that. Okay, this is actually two single quotes. So I'm saying when you find one single quote, I want you to replace that with two single quotes. So I know this looks weird, but remember that two single quotes here is escaped to be one single quote. Whew, I know. Very confusing. I know. So here's our variable. I could do this string replacement down here, but it's easier for me to go ahead and get it out of the way up here because now I'm invoking the commandlet. So I invoke it. Which server? You'll need to change this. If you want to follow along on your machine, you have to change that. You could use, like my machine is LearnItFirst 10/test. Okay, so that's how you might want to change this to your server name instances. I just am going to put localhost here. I went ahead though and put the double quotes in case you need to do an instance, because you do have to put those in a double quotes there. Which database do I want to use? The event log dump. What's the query that I'd like to execute? Well, I want to exec the stored procedure we just created. The value of the add date is, and here's where it gets a little bit to where you kind of have to have somebody show you an example and then figure it out from there. So we want to get the time written column. Now, when we look in SQL PowerShell, it says time. Don't use just that. It's a little confusing. It's actually the time written. If we use time, it won't error out. PowerShell will not cause an error to occur when a column isn't found in the set. It just will add nulls, or will add an empty string, rather, to that location. So time written is the actual column name. And then you can see the other, most of the others are right. Source, event ID, message, those are all correct. We can see entry type, though, is the type. It's not just type, even though it says type in the column when we print it out. And for the message, I'm going to use my variable temp because I've already gone up here and replaced. I've already done my parsing of the string, cleaning the string to replace any single quotes with it. Right? So all I really have to do is execute this. And because I can access this just like a drive, I could say cd users, administrator, desktop, and I think it's called PowerShell something. So I'm hitting, by the way, Shift and Tab to cycle through all the files that start with PowerShell. And I want to use PS1. And so we'll execute that. Oh, and it's got dir. I didn't mean to put dir in there. Power. And so I'll cycle through them that way. And there we go. Let's see. Did it actually do our load? Yeah. How cool is that? To be able to load that up using a single line of code, and now I have, you could add columns in here for application event log versus system event log, date taken. You could make this as complicated as you want, but now what's cool about this, you could look at where error message like backup, right? So that you could find anything related to backup failures, for example. You can now have historical versions of this. You could have this PowerShell script be scheduled to run on every SQL server in your enterprise. You could have it be scheduled to run on one SQL server, but to poll the other servers, right? So what you could do, I probably should have done this. I just thought of this. I could provide a list of servers. So like I could create a new text document. So server list, and I could say LearnItFirst 10, LearnItFirst 10/test, Jupiter, Branford. So I could provide a whole list of servers, and then I could just, in my PowerShell, I could wrap a for each for each item in this, then I would run that against it. And so now you could just have a job that runs a PowerShell script every day that collects all that information for every SQL Server. You can clear out the log from PowerShell. You could do all kinds of cool stuff using PowerShell. Now let me close with this. Just like with the CLR, I see a lot of garbage on the internet, and a lot of garbage in books, and a lot of garbage in training classes, and a lot of garbage at conventions and other places regarding how to use this. So with the CLR, I see people all the time just making up examples to show syntax, but nobody in their right mind would ever really do it that way. They would use Transact SQL, for example, instead of doing CLR. Okay? Be wary of the examples you see in books and on the internet and in classes and things like that, because I all too often come across some article that says, oh, neat cool PowerShell trick for SQL Server, and as soon as I read it, I'm like, man, who would do that? SSIS can do that in 2 or 3 easy steps. It'll be faster. It operates in the pipeline. It'll be awesome. And you're making me do PowerShell? Give me a break. Or I could do that in Transact SQL. Why would I could just do a SQL job for that? Why would I want to go down to PowerShell? It's not that PowerShell is bad. Don't take it that way. It's just don't try to use PowerShell as a replacement for tools that we already have, like integration services or Transact SQL. PowerShell is great when you need to integrate with other pieces, like I need to load the logs or load the information from Exchange into SQL Server very quickly, because you can iterate over anything. So it's great for interaction. It's not going to be something that you tend to use to do things that Transact SQL could do, unless, and let me put an asterisk in here, those of you that will be responsible for managing dozens or hundreds of servers in an enterprise, now this is going to be where that power of a text file to have a server list, and you could just iterate that against a whole set of servers and know that it's going to get done in 15 seconds. Now I can start getting into it. But with SQL Server 2008, now that we can issue queries against a whole group of servers, even that it's a little bit less likely to do that kind of thing. So don't think of PowerShell as an utter replacement for everything, or that just because it's new and cool that it will replace Transact SQL. It's not the intent. You really have to actually work to think of good quality uses of PowerShell. So expect to do that.